Okay. Do-do-do-do-do. Did you see the Gillette ads for the...
I haven't. I've been kind of avoiding them just because I don't want to dignify them with
They're so
with
awful.
my eyeballs.
They're so awful.
I can only expect that they are bad.
It's like,
actually, now that you say that, I kind of want to see how bad
it's just like, yeah. I mean, it's just like the crap. I mean, I understand it's all a commercial entity, but
and I mean this kind of speaks to maybe something that that New York Times article kind of raises, but for all the marketing they're doing is like, oh, it's Rogue One and Felicity Jones is the lead, and here's a new, great Star Wars female character, like, and then they're basically using the movie to market razors to men, right? Like, what is the message we're supposed to be getting here? So I'm watching one of these Gillette ads. So how did they do this? Are these like just the extras from the movie who were there anyway, or
I think
because this looks like the real set and everything. Did they shoot the movie and then like during their break or at night or something they brought in a whole different set of actors to film this?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I honestly thought it looked a little CGI to me, but maybe some face replacements or something like that.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
I know,
right. And then every story has a face, and it's the guy. But like in the movie, the face of this movie is a woman.
Yeah, and also every man in the frickin' movie has stubble on his face.
Yeah,
I guess they couldn't show a woman shaving her legs before she went into battle, though.
Yeah, I guess.
So they had to have some kind of synergy, right?
Well, but I mean, you make a good point. Like Diego Luna, like the only clean-shaven people in the movie that I've seen so far are Chirrut Imwe and Orson Krennic.
Exactly.
Like that's who, and even then, like Chirrut Imwe might have a slight mustache.
What they should have done is they should have paid Hayden Christensen to come in and have him like at the end of the ad with half a mask. And like trying to shave around his face, around that thing that goes up onto his cheeks. It's very hard to get the hard to reach areas.
Yeah. he uses like an off-brand razor and he's shaving and he nicks himself. No.
We should have had that in the show. We need funnier. We need funnier stuff in the. I'll try to slip this in or I can just edit it. I'll just edit it as a teaser before the show.
Sure.
I'll edit it.
Okay. Or we could just. Hey, I guess we started the show already.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, a great adventure took place.
Talking Bird, a special edition.
Hello, and welcome to Talking Bird, the special edition, episode 63. I'm your host, Robert Zachary, along with my clean-shaven co-host, John Llewellyn. Hello, John.
Hello.
Kind of had a weird start.
I did shave this morning.
You did,
but it's already started to grow. I have a heavy 5 o'clock shadow, so it's already starting to grow in.
Damn.
Maybe
Maybe you need to get a Gillette razor.
Yeah, well, I used to. That actually used to be my brand, and now I have an electric razor that I use.
See, I don't. I have a beard, so I don't. I only use a razor occasionally to clean up my neck area.
Right.
And I'm a Harry's razor guy, which, hey, Harry's, you could always sponsor the show. I'll do an ad for it.
Aptly named.
Aptly named. Well, so...
How have you been?
It's
been a couple weeks?
Yeah, it's been a couple weeks. We're 42 and a... Was it 41 or 42 and a half days away from Rogue One? Yeah. We've had a lot of news kind of break while we were taking our little court-appointed hiatuses or whatever you call them. They weren't court-appointed, I swear. I've learned from my...
Not court-appointed. Yeah. They're not mandated by the courts, but they're strongly suggested by the courts.
The court of public opinion. Trying to build an empire here, and I can't do it if people don't listen to our show. No. I don't know. I guess did you do anything Star Warsy in the last 2 weeks?
I read Star Wars stuff. So I read Ahsoka. We'll probably actually end up talking about that next week because there's so much else to cover. But I did read Ahsoka. I reread Twilight Company to kind of get a running start on reading Ahsoka. And I liked Twilight Company more this time around.
Man, I'm such a slow reader.
Now that I kind of knew what to expect, I enjoyed it more.
I feel like I'm denying myself stuff because I'm a slow reader, and I'm like, I don't want to commit to something I'm not going to finish in time to talk about it. So now tell me, if I liked Bloodlines, would I like, and The Perfect Weapon, would I like the Ahsoka book? Because those seem to be the only of the new canon that I really enjoy.
Yeah, I think so. It's probably closer to A Perfect Weapon than to Bloodline. I mean, it's a young adult novel, so know that going in. But it is a hybrid story. It's kind of in between the Clone Wars and Rebels. I mean, it's essentially a second Rebels prequel novel.
I see.
Along with the New Dawn. I liked it. I thought it was really good. I liked Bloodline better. I like Lost Stars a little bit better. But then beyond that, I would put Ahsoka somewhere in there with Twilight Company and A New Dawn in terms of how much I liked it.
Okay, well, sorry.
It's it's a good story, and it's written well.
And you'll
that's my quick review.
I was going to say, and you'll do
more next
more in depth next week. Okay, well, I probably should have asked you that off the air because now I'm did I just chew off half of your review? Anyway, the other big, I guess if we're talking Star Wars things, I was humble brag. I was in on the big island of Hawaii for a week. I did do one Star Wars thing. It's kind of funny. I think regular listeners, know that I've kind of ignited a small interest in collecting original Kenner Star Wars toys, and we've talked about that. But little did I know, I basically expected that, we go to Hawaii, there tends to be a lot of local shops, and there's maybe a Barnes and Noble, which there wasn't on the island. There's a Costco, there's a Target, there's a Walmart. So it was like, I kind of, when you run out of things to do at night, you kind of sometimes wander, and I didn't see anything that interesting or anything I wanted to try to bring home in my luggage until I found that there was actually a toy store on the island called Toy Conquest, which was kind of they mostly were new stuff, but newish all the way back to they had new Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones and some of the newer Hasbro stuff. I mean, they had every kind of toy you would imagine, Barbies and Legos and stuff. But I did finally, when I was there, stumbled across their vintage area, and I picked up a Han Solo in Endor gear, which if you ever look that up, it's a very strange looking depiction of Harrison Ford. He kind of looks a bit like Brian Dennehy. He's kind of got a fat head, and it doesn't help that he's wearing a very not form-fitting, handmade soft goods, as they say in the parlance of toy collecting, a soft goods jacket. And then I picked up the well, I guess supposedly this is the bane of there's a couple figures when people try to collect their 96, they say, or whatever, their original Kenner Star Wars, is like ones that they kind of don't like having to buy, but you have to buy it. You have to buy them anyway to complete it. And the one is I think the Imperial Dignitary, which people hate, but I didn't get that. I got Rancor Keeper. Which has
your favorite,
which looks like a bit like
your buddy.
Yes, he looks a bit like Donald Pleasance.
Okay, I could see that actually, based on the actual actor. I can see that. And
I picked up a second Bespin Guard, which I think. I mean, there's a one with the mustache, and then there's a dark skinned Bespin Guard, and that was the one I'd been looking for, and so. I don't know. I may have paid too much. I may have gotten a good deal. I really don't know. I kind of just was like, it's either this or I'm going to buy a bunch of stuff that I probably, when I get it home, I'll be like, why did I buy this? So I thought I'd just put the money on that. So that was my Star Wars stuff. But while we were gone, we had a lot of news. Number one, we have a young Lando Calrissian cast in for the Han Solo movie, which I assume would be called Han Solo.
Yeah, I don't know what it'll be called.
And
that's a good question.
That is Donald Glover.
Yep.
And we haven't talked about this at all, so I guess this is, even though it's been, a week or 2 weeks, it's like, I guess it's kind of a hot take for us about our opinions, about our feelings, because I think if you're a regular listener, you know that Lando is probably the closest to, sacred ground to us as far as wanting it to be done right and expanded and
right.
So I mean, let's just get right to it. What's your
treated
feeling?
With care?
Yeah, treated with care. What's your feeling?
I'm okay with it. We talked when when the rumor, or not the rumor, but when they first announced that they were going to be casting a young Lando and that Donald Glover was their first choice. I mean, this was a couple months ago. So we talked a little bit about that, and I think I was like, well, maybe, I wasn't the biggest Community fan. I guess Atlanta, I don't think had started yet. But, and I still haven't seen Atlanta, which that's the latest show where people are like, you haven't seen that show?
Right.
I'm getting to it. I've been very busy. But he's reportedly it's a very good show, and I'm actually okay with it. I mean, the fact that he was the first choice and kind of the assumptive Lando for a while, it had time to sink in, and so I wasn't surprised. I was like, all right, this could work, and I think it could work. It'll depend on kind of what the rest of the movie is like. And I don't want to get too much into spoiler territory here, but there's a rumor that the movie will show how Han got the Millennium Falcon from Lando, and that's where I'm like, I don't know that we really need to see that. Right. Like, I don't know that that's such an important moment that needs to be immortalized on film, but I think Donald Glover could be fine. It could be, depending on how big the role is, depending on what they ask him to do, it could be good.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of where I've ended up with this, because initially when the rumors had come that he was in serious consideration, I had a lot of trouble kind of separating my feelings about Community, which I'm not a fan of, and kind of just I had seen him in a few things, and I felt like he was kind of playing that character in a lot of different things, and I as well have not seen Atlanta, but have heard that it's very good. So I might be checking it out later. But I was thinking, it's like, he's kind of at this level now where, and I've heard some, rumblings when people say, it's like, who you should probably trust is you probably should trust these casting directors, and that they've seen something in this performance, in his talents, and it just might be a situation where we just haven't seen the full range. And my only thing was it's that kind of what I would look for in a Lando is I always look for him in that the way I view him in Empire. But it's like he's not the same guy in Jedi, and he's not even the same guy when he's depicted in Rebels. So I feel like it's like, well, you may not get that smooth kind of Lando, but then again, he was that version of Lando was literally trying to deceive a friend of his in order to stay there so he could be captured. So it's like, there's a lot that they could do with this character. And I think as long as I just want to see like a capable Lando, that's the thing I always think about Lando. He's like, even when stuff goes wrong for him, it's like, he's very capable and he knows kind of how to get it. He knows he's been in trouble before. It's like, I kind of, and this, I don't consider this spoiler because it's just my opinion. I kind of wonder if they're going to do kind of Han Solo's going to almost be like bumbling. I just get this feeling that that's the way that they, maybe it's because the pedigree,
maybe keying off that moment. Sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
No, go finish your thought.
No, it's just the idea that, the idea that that's kind of the depictions of the way actors have been depicted in the works of Lord and Miller about, the jump streets and in the Lego movie and their early work on Last Man on Earth, they tend to gravitate towards these bumbling kind of, I don't even know what the word, like lovable saps. And I think that's kind of the, if they follow, unless they're going into something different, which, there may be, it's not like they can only do this one thing, but I kind of feel like if that's their wheelhouse, hopefully they might put that on Han, and then Lando will be kind of the more capable, like the big brother to Han, maybe a guiding influence.
Yeah. Which is sort of odd to think of Donald Glover in that kind of role.
Exactly.
And so, when you put it like that now, I'm like, well, I don't know how that's going to work. But I didn't mean to interrupt you. But what I was thinking when you were saying that, kind of maybe a bumbling or a Han Solo who hasn't quite figured things out. I wonder if they're going to key off of maybe that moment in A New Hope where, they're on the Death Star and he's charging after those stormtroopers, and then he runs into a whole bunch of them and he has to go, ah! And like, then suddenly he's the one being chased. That's a very kind of old comedy, like almost slapsticky kind of conceit. And I wonder how much of that kind of humor we're going to, I mean, of course, kind of the other piece of this that we're dancing around a little bit is that the cinematographer of the Han Solo movie has spoken up and said it's going to be brave and different and it's definitely going to break some rules, visually and narratively, basically
all the things that drive
saying this ain't your daddy's Star Wars movie.
Well, it's the thing that drives fear into the heart of like a lot of Star Wars fans.
Well, it does, and I wonder how much of that is maybe calculated that to try to avoid some of what the Marvel movies are going through, which is, okay, these are starting to maybe feel formulaic, or even Guardians of the Galaxy, which was like the different Marvel movie, it still essentially followed a lot of what had already been set out, and because they have this overarching plan, everything has to fit a particular role, and that there's not really a lot of opportunity to kind of blow the doors off and really take a left turn in what they're doing. And we'll see if how much Doctor Strange adheres to those things and versus taking those left turns, because that's out this weekend. But I wonder how much of it is on the one hand, maybe it'll strike fear into the hearts of people who are like, well, I just hope they give me the Han Solo movie that I want to see, versus like, okay, I hope that they don't just keep making the same movie or the same kind of movie over and over and over again, right? That these anthology movies, these Star Wars stories, are supposed to be these kind of genre explorations, these kind of more risky takes on Star Wars, at least according to Kathleen Kennedy. So that it sounds like that's Lucasfilm is on board with that, and that's the whole point of these things. And so, I wonder how much of it is also reassuring. Like, don't worry, you're not just going to get the same movie over and over again. We're going to make sure that some of these are a little different. But to that point, then what is that? Where does the Lando Han Solo relationship fit into that? And then what does that mean for kind of what we can expect to see out of Donald Glover, I guess?
Yeah, and I mean, it really comes back to the fact that I have to ask myself, it's like, about expectations. Like, what kind of Han Solo movie am I expecting? Because to be perfectly honest, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I wasn't ever expecting one. If somebody asked me if I was the head of Disney, which I'm not, never will be, because I probably have these short-sighted opinions, I would say, somebody say, like, how about a young Han Solo movie? I'd be like, how about we not do that? Because that would be my thing. I would have, like, my initial take on it was I have no interest in it. But now that it's a reality, it's like, well, what would I want to see? And it's like, yeah, it's kind of like the idea is like, is it going to be just touchstones, or is it going to be an opportunity? Is it going to be an opportunity to show these characters in a way that's different? I mean, even me saying like, oh, I think Han's going to be more slapsticky. Well, I have no, other than the fact of the pedigree of the filmmakers, I really have no reason to back that up. But I mean, it's kind of interesting because they've done so much. They've done so much, like they've done the casting stuff and they've had it out there, and they're talking about this movie when Rogue One hasn't come out, and you can't not think that Rogue One's reception is going to have a great influence on the production of the Han Solo movie. I mean, if they find out that people are going to be rejecting, change, like I've already seen a lot of pushback on Twitter this morning, because I think it there was something in an article where someone basically admitted that there's not going to be a long time ago and a galaxy far. There's not going to be no opening crawl in this movie. Pretty much, like they're 90% sure that there's going to be nothing like that. Now, I mean, people got used to the fact that there wasn't a 20th Century Fox fanfare, and I think that in the end, if the film is good and the music's good and it gets you to that place and it tells an interesting story and maybe expands the myth of Star Wars in a good way, I don't think whether or not there was an opening crawl really matters, But there's certain people that they have to have that touchstone, otherwise it feels wrong to them. It feels weird. But, you could argue that even the Clone Wars doesn't have they didn't do an opening crawl for every episode of that. Right. They don't do a crawl for every episode of Rebels, or even try to...
Right. Are we going to start these movies with like a quote from Yoda or something, the way that the Clone Wars did?
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, I think they'll probably need a few more data points before they do anything definitive. I mean, especially if Rogue One is their gritty war movie to start off, even if they have scaled back some of that grittiness, I don't know that a poor box office performance will necessarily give them a lot of information about, say, the Han Solo movie, because it sounds like that's not going to be a gritty war movie, right? And so the Rogue One doing less well than they expected might tell them like, okay, well, maybe we don't make another gritty war movie in the future. And so then if they want to do something like a Boba Fett movie or, anything else, then they like scale back on how gritty it is or how violent or, realistically warlike or whatever they're doing. If they make a Boba Fett movie as, say, a Western, you could see that maybe going in a slightly different direction than it would have if, Rogue One is a smashing success. But for the Han Solo movie, I mean, the other piece of this too is that, well, two things. There is how Lando is currently portrayed on Rebels, and he hasn't shown up a lot, and he hasn't really, like, he's been kind of there, and he's been kind of like a con man, or, he always has some kind of scheme, some kind of money-making scheme going. And this is, in the Rebels time period, which is, I assume, post whenever this young Han Solo movie is going to take place.
Right.
But then there's also the way he's portrayed in the books, which I reread as well. The first one, the Meinharp of the Sharu, a couple weeks ago, and what I think is interesting about those books compared to the Han Solo trilogy, that first Han Solo trilogy, so we're talking 70s, 80s. These were some of the first Star Wars extended universe novels to come out. I think they came out after Splinter of the Mind's Eye, but I think
I think the Landos actually
might have been the only.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I think they came out. I think the Landos came out between Empire and Jedi.
Right. So, I mean, that would make sense.
It wasn't worth interrupting you for that. So
no. But right. So, the Han Solo trilogy, and I think I'm probably getting this from like Pablo Hidalgo or something he posted on Twitter a while back. The way they're written and kind of the story, they're very much. You can see common threads or a common style between those books and the Indiana Jones movies, right? And in the way they're structured, and they start out with a kind of a big action set piece, and they involve, he has to break into this prison or something, so the story doesn't quite work, but very very much that kind of old pulp or old serial style of a story. And the Lando books are very much of their time, right? Still pulpy, but that kind of late 70s science fiction,
right,
where there's like humor in it and this like psychedelic craziness going on, where there's a room, you're in a room and the dimensions of the room keep changing, and suddenly one character is really big and one's really small, and you're not sure who shrunk and who grew to be the size of a giant. And there's like a computer who you interact with. It's very reminiscent of, Hitchhiker's Guide in some ways. It's very much that kind of late 70s pulp sci-fi fantasy style, but with Lando in it, I think it actually really works for that character in a lot of ways and for a lot of reasons. But the settings in which we're used to seeing these two characters are very different. Even though Lando was, kind of created to be a Han Solo replacement if they decided to kill off Han Solo, essentially.
Right.
They are, I think, unique enough characters that the situations they kind of get to show off themselves best in are not necessarily the same kinds of situations. Earlier you were talking about how he's portrayed at Empire, and that's how you think of him. And that's I think of Lando as a combination of how he is in Empire and then how he is in the novels in his own trilogy. And it's especially in Empire, it's this complicated, he's just trying to get by, and if that means deceiving his friend, well then either he does that because that's what he has to do to survive, and maybe that means his friends mean less to him. But the other interpretation of that is like, in Sabak terms, right? He plays the cards that he's dealt, and he says, okay, this is, here's basically the only way I can deal with the situation now. And then once the situation changes, or once I get a little further, once I get a little more information, once an opportunity opens itself up, I'm going to take that opportunity and, maybe try to figure out a way. Yeah, I had to give Han to that bounty hunter. I didn't know that he was going to be frozen in carbonite. And I didn't know that my city was going to be put on lockdown. But now that it is, the situation's changed, and I have an opportunity to improve what was going to happen to me if I just stayed where I am. That's kind of how I see Lando. And so, yeah, like you're saying, to make that character kind of a mentor for Han, like I'm having a hard time picturing that, and I'm having a hard time I am having a little bit of a hard time viewing Donald Glover in that role, but I'm also going to assume that the role isn't huge. Like, I don't think they would bring him on to be like the full-on sidekick the whole movie. But then again, why would you get someone like Donald Glover if it wasn't a sizable role?
Yeah, I mean,
I don't really. I'm back to not knowing how to feel about this. So Thank you, Rob.
I mean, I like that we have complex feelings about this, because it's like, even I
clearly spent a lot of time thinking about Lando.
After I say that thing about like, oh, he's going to be a mentor, but then I think it's like, well, where was this position when they reintroduce each other in Empire? Well, you know that Han pulled some shit, pardon my French, that he's embarrassed about when he calls him up for help, and he knows that there might be a reckoning. And at first we go, oh, there's going to be a reckoning. And it's like, you had a lot of guts after what you pulled. And it's like, oh, well, obviously, they're probably going to show what he pulled. But maybe the fact is like, it's less than a mentorial kind of idea. This after I just said that, now I think to myself, like, maybe he's going to actually, it's going to be more of a, like, their friendship they were kind of like, how it's like, I mean, I've never had a situation where it's like I had to have a group of people had to get together to solve a big problem. I mean, maybe it's like this idea of like, I don't know, like the way people get when you're on jury duty and y'all hang out and you've got time and it's like you have this camaraderie, and then boom, the case is over, and then you're just like, you never speak to each other again, and you never think about each other until like you run into one of them at the mall, and you're like, oh, that's the guy that berated me for 20 minutes about, saying I should say this person was guilty or something. I mean, it's kind of a stretch. But, I was watching Empire last night because I like to watch a Star War before I go to bed on show nights or whatever. And it was like, it's like you almost think to yourself that Lando might be the only realist in the Star Wars universe.
Right.
He's the only guy who realizes that you can't, like, just because the bad guys show up, it doesn't mean that you throw yourself on your sword to try to, further their, this agenda. I mean, we don't know how he's, aligned with this. I mean, this rebellion isn't something necessarily everybody knows about anyway. He just knows, like, this guy that you had an issue with is going to be here in about 2 hours. And I've got a gun to your head, and I've got a gun to the head of everybody who works here, of this place that you run, essentially. And it's like, what are you going to do? Give up 3 people in a droid? Or, it's like, and so he's like, yeah, he's a realist. He realizes, and he, of course the deal gets, he wasn't, when he says deal, it's like, there was going to be no financial gain for him. It was literally a mafia shakedown.
Right. It's the Empire says they'll leave me alone.
He's like,
basically,
you've got a very nice Cloud City. It would be a shame if anything happened to it.
Yeah. And something else too, right, is when he made that deal, Han hadn't shown up yet. So the Empire is telling him, oh, by the way, your old buddy Han Solo is coming. Right? What's Lando supposed to think? Like, he hasn't seen Han in a very long time. He pulled some stunt last time. Like, he's like, what does Han want from me? The only reason he's coming is because he wants something from me. Who knows what that could be? Like, he has no idea that, whether Han's coming there with good intentions himself either. So yeah, I mean, I don't really want to make this analogy, but I will. So on The Simpsons, the former showrunner Bill Oakley, on several commentaries, he basically said that in the early seasons, Superintendent Chalmers was one of his favorite characters, and I think he still is one of his favorite characters, but essentially because he was like the only person on that show who didn't abide by like the internal logic of the show. He was like, if you took a person from the real world and dropped him into the world of the Simpsons, right? So he just would react to all of Skinner's craziness and everything else like a real person would. Exactly. And that's sort of, so I don't want to say that Lando is the Superintendent Chalmers of Star Wars, because
yes, you do.
I think that diminishes Lando. But No, I mean, I hadn't quite thought of it in those terms, but I think in a lot of ways you're right, or at least he reflects the reality for a lot of people in the Star Wars universe, the fictional universe, for a lot of people who, they weren't fighting, they weren't part of the rebellion. They maybe didn't love the Empire, but as long as they can do whatever job, as long as they can earn a living, as long as they can live where they want, the Empire doesn't really bother them day to day. And so, they're just trying to get by. The Empire says they will leave us alone. Like, yeah, maybe reminding us to ban a gas without a license or whatever. The Empire's kind of looked the other way. Now they're telling us they're going to look the other way forever. Great. Like, what can I do to just keep doing this thing that I've been doing, and find that kind of middle ground of just like living day to day in this crazy universe of this this galactic empire and this ragtag group of idealistic rebels, right? If you don't have those ideals, then what are you expected to do? And so I think Lando probably reflects that middle ground. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's interesting to think then about how that might manifest in this young Han Solo movie, or, because I think that also is pretty accurate about how an accurate description of how he is portrayed in Rebels too. Like, yeah, he's like a schemer, and he's willing to sell out or pretend to sell out the crew of the Ghost if he thinks it'll get him what he needs. But, the reality is, like, trying to make money, right? And he knows that the Ghost crew are capable enough to get out of whatever scrape he puts them in, and so he's just gonna keep doing his thing and just keep trying to move on in his life, and so that's maybe where I get a little worried, like, with this, hearing that this young Han Solo movie is going to break all sorts of rules, and it's going to be crazy and totally bodacious or whatever. It's okay. Are they at least going to adhere to what the core of these characters is?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's important. I mean, I don't think anybody, obviously people were wanting to hear maybe different kinds of stories, but yeah, I think it's like there needs to be an internal logic to Star Wars, which is like, it's a little bit different than, say, like a Star Trek, because it's, it's more of a fantasy than a supposedly science fiction. So it's a bit more malleable, but it's almost like in some ways it's harder because there is kind of a weird moral core to it. It's like you can't go outside this center, and it, it's like, eventually someone's going to be like, hey, how come my life sucks because these Skywalkers have to run roughshod all over the galaxy? They're basically, why don't we just kill everybody named Skywalker? Because it seems like they're the only ones causing problems around here.
Yeah. And honestly, it suggests that maybe the role of the Lucasfilm story group is different depending on the project, which sounds like it might be obvious, but at this point, even though more and more of the story group folks who are not Pablo Hidalgo, more of the other folks are starting to do some interviews and maybe explain to fans what it is that they actually do. I think there's still a lot of assumptions among fans about, like, oh, the Lucasfilm story group is there to do X, Y, and Z, or even confusion about what it is they do. And I think maybe, for a movie like Rogue One, the job of the Lucasfilm story group might be, okay, here's what's happening in the storyline up to this point. Maybe this is where Pablo Hidalgo and Leland Chee kind of exert a little more work to say, like, okay, here's how we're keeping the canon consistent, or, here are some ideas that have been sitting around, or, here's how we make sure that this doesn't break anything that we've already set up. Whereas with, and then within that, go nuts, create whatever, new rebel characters or new Imperial characters you want. Great. New Death Troopers, sure, put them in. Tank Troopers, great. Jeddah, this planet that's like a Force Mecca, and Chirrut Imwe and Baze Malbit, like, great. Create whatever characters you want. Whereas with the young Han Solo movie, which involves existing characters, that's where they might be like, yeah, put them in whatever crazy situation you want to, just make sure that the characters, like, this is how the characters think and act, and so that the way that they react to whatever crazy situation you put them in would be consistent with like a younger version of where they are in Empire, right? So it, for some movies, maybe the Lucasfilm Story Group is doing a little more work on the character side and making sure that the character is consistent with past and future work, whereas in others they're making sure that kind of the timeline and the plot and everything, all of the other structure and story is consistent with other stories, I guess. Is that, that sounds obvious, but I feel like I don't know that I've heard that kind of articulated anywhere.
Yeah, I feel like their role is more of an idea that they have consumed basically almost everything that a person could consume in Star Wars, and that it's really their job to say, point out like, well, you can do that, but just be forewarned that they did a one-off Han Solo comic where he did that exact same thing. And you technically, need to pay this person if you use that, or you might want to change it. They don't, not that they would say, oh, you can't contradict a comic book, but the idea of like, well, well, has anybody done this with Han yet? And they go, well, yeah, we did this. And then maybe they go, we need, or they flip it and go, well, we need like, some idea of like, I mean, the best example I could see is it's kind of a plug for another podcast, but it's Star Wars related. Matt Gorley over at I Was There Too podcast. He's doing a series of Star Wars like original trilogy conversations. So he talked to the guy, and I'm blanking on his name, he was the stormtrooper that Obi-Wan Kenobi mind tricks, and he was also he was Fixer in the deleted Tashi Station, Anchorhead Anchorhead scenes. And then this week, 2 weeks ago, he had Clive Revel, who played the voice of the Emperor in the pre-special edition. And basically, without spoiling it, there becomes this big conversation as to who was the physical representation of the Emperor in this now deleted sequence or changed sequence. And it got to the point where they like had to reach out to Pablo Hidalgo, but Pablo didn't know, and then he went to Rinsler, and then they went back, and they finally, I guess they got, and I won't spoil it for people because I think you need to head over there and hear it anyway, but it's like they finally came to the realization. But I guess my point is that Pablo Hidalgo seems like a bit more of like, if he can't answer it, then his job is to facilitate and to reach out and to be the guy who like, I don't know, but I know someone who does. And that's where I kind of get this thing whereas I think a lot of people have created this mythology that he sits kind of on a throne with his, Leland Chi and the other people that work there, and they all just kind of like, please, what kind of drink does Han Solo like? Actually, he doesn't like drinks at all. It's like, I feel like he's just, the metaphor, I can't, it's like he kind of lubricates the wheels of storytelling so we don't run into like really ugly contradictions in character and style,
Right. And I think so he was on the Star Wars show a couple weeks ago, and there was that extended like hour-long interview where I think he talked about that a little bit, that him and Leland Chi are basically there like when everyone else in the story group is putting something together, they go, hey, Pablo, hey, Leland, have we done anything like this before? Or is this going to screw something up? And they go, well, we sort of did something like this previously. Or, as in Rogue One, like, well, we have this character that's been sitting around, Saw Gerrera. Why don't we use him? Or, this dates back to the Ewok adventures, and this is kind of how this character was established. But if you want to change him, it's the Ewok adventures. So, yeah, you're right. I think that's kind of what their job is, to like be the people where they go, hey, are we going to screw this up if we do it this way? And they go yes or no. I mean, that's kind of,
I mean, so
I'm sure that I think having that check is really helpful for something like this Han Solo movie, Han Solo and Lando and whoever else is in it that we might have seen before, where they go, hey, I know that this movie is supposed to like break new ground for Star Wars and everything, but how badly would we screw it up if Han Solo like really hates Wookiees or something,
right?
And they were like, yeah, that would be bad.
Exactly. And it's like, like I said, when Kasdan and Abrams probably came out with their script and they had a character named Kylo Ren, I'm sure someone there said, there is a character in the Droids cartoon called Kybo Ren. And I'm sure the conversation was like, yeah, but nobody watched those, or everybody is like not going to care. So let's just drop it. And they're like, yeah, you're right. It's that kind of stuff. It's just it's a safeguard. Because I know that Trek has had that in the past. Denise and Michael Okuda. I'm sorry if I got the name wrong. And they were more of a technical kind of person, where there was the long running joke that Ronald D. Moore, he's the guy that when he does Outlander now, and he did the reboot of Battlestar Galactica, and he's well known as one of the most highly regarded Trek writers. And he's not a scientist, he's a storyteller, and he would just go, when a character had to say something, he'd just write tech the tech, and it was their job. Their job to figure out like, when that happens, we have to say that. And I don't think that's exactly the way it is, but now you see that Filoni was on set for episode 8 on some level. It makes you they care about a consistency, I guess is my point.
Right. Well, and I think too, these directors and creatives, they have their own network and they want input from, as someone who has been working, has been directing Star Wars TV forever. What do you think about this scene? Or, do you want to come hang out on the set? I mean, it's, in some of the Force Awakens Blu-ray J.J. Abrams commentary that's come out, right? One of the key scenes towards the end of the movie, the lightsaber duel between Rey and Kylo Ren, some of that was based off of him showing the movie to Ava DuVernay. I think that's how you pronounce it, right? And Ava DuVernay is saying like, why don't you, do it in slow motion or have her pause and like take a moment and breathe deep and so and George Lucas would show rough cuts of the movie to Spielberg, of course, but Frank Darabont and what's his name, Brian De Palma, right? So these people are friends with each other. They seek each other's input on these things, and so now having this network of people who have been doing that, but specifically on Star Wars, I think is a bonus for these people, right? They can say, okay, J.J. Abrams, you want to come hang out on the set of this? Or Gareth Edwards seems like he's game to show up wherever they want him. Like, spend a day on the set of this Han Solo movie, Gareth Edwards, and let us know what you think. Or, so I think part of it's about the consistency, but I think part of it is also just to foster this kind of creative environment where these no matter who is in charge of this thing, you have people trading ideas back and forth and just trying to make the work better, I guess. Yeah.
And I will just say, maybe we should put a pin on this, move on, but I will say one thing as far as that goes with Lucas. It's like, I think the only person he ever trusted on that was Steven Spielberg, though.
Yeah.
Most of those guys,
he would show it to people and they would go like, this maybe needs some work, buddy. And he would go, well, you just don't understand what I'm getting at here.
Well, I mean, it was like, and the truth is like a lot of like, say, Francis Ford Coppola's suggestions would have put Star Wars in a weird kind of place. Right. It might have made it a footnote of the 70s. He's like, you got to have Princess Leia needs to be sexier and all this kind of stuff. And it's like,
right.
But yeah, I mean, we should see it. I mean, even Donald Glover's mother isn't completely sold on this idea, so I don't feel bad about like going like she basically said, "Don't screw this up." It's like because he's a good character, and I don't want to, It's. I will say this is one thing. It was like, do you get any, do you get any kind of extra interest because it's like. he's about your age.
People are going to go see this movie.
Well, no, I was just saying Donald Glover's. He's about your now. It's like you got somebody cast in this iconic role, and he's about your age. It's kind of I felt like when Ewan McGregor got cast as Obi-Wan Kenobi, it was like, oh, someone from my generation is now part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much they're banking on that.
Oh no, I don't. I was just asking on a personal level.
This idea that people are going to go see this movie because Donald Glover is in it. I don't know. There might be a few. I mean, I don't know that saying like, oh, finally people in my age group are in a Star Wars movie now. Like, I don't know. That was never really a big deal to me, I guess.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I know. Well,
what about yourself?
Well, like I said, when Ewan was cast, I kind of was like, oh, now we're at the point where my generation is old enough to be in these movies. And, at the time, I never thought of the idea that a kid would be in Star Wars, which obviously changed with the Phantom Menace. But it was kind of like that kind of like, it was kind of a feeling of coming of age or thing. But, you've had probably a lot of people your age in these Star Wars movies. But like,
well, since the prequels, I think Natalie Portman is roughly my age, I think. I guess that means Hayden Christensen is also roughly my age.
Yeah, I guess that doesn't really ring true.
I think the prequels definitely changed that. Yeah. But the fact that they were my age, like the fact that Hayden Christensen was my age, didn't really change the way that I viewed him or make me care.
Maybe partly because of his performance. But well, let's move.
The performance is the most important thing.
Exactly. So I guess we have the new. I guess last time we were talking about posters, and I guess there's been another 4 or 5 posters released right after that.
Yeah, they did the round of
for Rogue One
single character posters for Rogue One, which they did something similar with The Force Awakens, where every one of them had something covering one of their eyes,
obscuring their eyes.
And so this one is based on that last official poster where you had kind of the Death Star schematics overlaid on Jyn Erso's face. Now you have these single character posters with the Death Star plans projected onto everyone's face in the thing. And I think it works a little bit better for some characters than others. Like I said with the big one, with the one with all the characters on it. I mean, I think doing that just it gives the impression like these characters might be androids or something. Not Star Wars androids, but any androids in any other film franchise. Like, so are these people robots, or are they like, why do they have like electronic stuff on their face? But the Chirrut Îmwe one I think looks really good. I will say that, and especially with the kind of the white clouded contacts that Diane has in. It's an effective effect. I will say that.
Yeah, I mean, I think.
But other than that, I don't really. It's like, yeah, fine, great.
Yeah, I didn't get anything major off of these. It's like I said, it is that kind of like, I would think that maybe if somebody saw this and didn't understand the story, they would go, "Well, are they all robots? What's with the I thought it was really interesting that they picked. If they were trying to get brand identification, they'd pick, people like, characters like they wouldn't have a Vader or or like a Death Trooper.
Mm-hmm.
Like like it's that I kind of like more iconic, kind of like having a Stormtrooper mask that might get people kind of more in the idea of like, oh, okay, this is a Star Wars movie. Because I mean, even on it, the Star Wars is very small and it's. It's not the first thing your eye goes to, but I mean, whatever. I mean, we've gone over and over this idea that is kind of a brand confusion with some people, but I think it might be overplayed. I don't feel necessarily like people are going to be like, after the first 5 minutes, they might have, after the movie's over, it's like, well, where was Luke? That kind of stuff, right. Or there's no Luke in this one again, and it's like, well, right. That's Darth Vader, blah blah blah. But I mean, it's Star Wars. It's it's such a brand now that I feel like And I honestly feel like even Bob Iger had kind of muted his expectations for this film, partly probably because it didn't want to be embarrassed in front of the shareholders. So they kind of start low, and then anything more than they expect will be a boon or to them. So the marketing is kind of, and we were joking about before the show about the razors and the kind of like they're backing products that are like, are they going towards, men between the ages of 25 and 40 and that men 25 and 40 who shave are our demographic, where it's like, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that's even, if that kind of stuff even tracks well anymore. If movies really want to throw themselves behind a certain demographic, but whatever. Let me see. What else? You got some more Rogue One rumors?
Right. So, I mean, you mentioned, what if they had done this with Vader or the Death Troopers? It turns out that we may have a Tarkin cameo in Rogue One after all, which, I mean, that was rumored way, way, way back.
Right.
When they were still rumoring about this movie, in the early days, that, it could be Vader or Tarkin. And then it's like, oh, well, it's going to be Vader. And now we're hearing, well, maybe Tarkin will be in it after all. And maybe not a big role, but, a cameo. And he might be sitting at a desk, or, he shows up at the end to assume control of the Death Star project or something like that. I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, I think it's a foregone conclusion that he's going to appear at some point, because they've been teasing it. Haven't been particularly coy about, when they had that blurry shot of Jimmy Smits, and he already let it go on the Talk or the View that it was a cameo, and that he was like, he just kind of says, "Can you say cameo?" And it's just like he just probably showed up. They glued that goatee on him. And it was like one day's worth of work in England or whatever. So, yeah, I mean, I don't expect a lot of it. I feel that the one, Rogue One might have this kind of issue that, I remember when the Phantom Menace came out, I was talking to my brother about it. He was very like annoyed about how, he's like, why do they feel like they have to tie everything into it? It's like, why do they have to show how C-3PO was made, and why does it have to be Darth Vader, and that kind of thing? And I understand that frustration, and I hope they're not really setting themselves up for something like that, because there's been rumors that obviously Tarkin, Dr. Ezavan, and I want to say Walrus Man, but it's not. It's Ponda Baba or whatever he's called now. Having a cameo, because they can see their arms in some shots, and now there's people doing like forensic photography analyzing that Porkins might actually have a cameo in this movie too. Which,
I guess there are going to be X-Wings in this movie, whether we'll see Red Squadron or Red Group, and then I guess that's a good question. We'll see young Porkins.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I also have to remember that not, 90% of 98% of the people who go see these movies don't know all this stuff. And so it's not going to, it doesn't hurt the story, and it's just a nice way to like kind of key into it. But I'm just, I know that J.J. Abrams had kind of discussed his own use of callbacks to the original trilogy when he was making The Force Awakens, to the point where he felt that he really needed, when he was all said and done, he actually rolled a lot of it back. But the funny thing is I think there's a lot of it. I mean, a lot of it, like almost too much. So it'll be interesting, like if, it's going to hit that sweet spot of it being like, why are people, the first night or two, it's going to be people clapping in the theater, and some people going like, what are they clapping about? Who is this guy? But then you have to discuss it later. I think this is going to be a movie.
Like, who is that guy who showed up at the end?
Yeah.
Like, what was he supposed to be doing?
I think there's going to be a lot of people like talking to other people about like, what did I like the story, but what was the deal with that guy and that guy?
Right. Yeah, there's going to have to be a lot, like, for those Star Wars fans who are seeing the movie with folks who are non-Star Wars fans, and I'm not making any generalizations about gender or whatever here, but if you're a Star Wars fan and you're seeing Rogue One with a non-Star Wars fan, I imagine you'll have to spend a little more time explaining stuff after the movie than you did with, say, The Force Awakens. Right? Like The Force Awakens, you can kind of go in clean and just not have to worry about who's that guy.
I had questions about The Force Awakens when I came out of it. I'll be honest.
That's true too. Yeah.
I honestly, I was thinking about this the other night. When I actually walked out the first time, I had assumed the Coruscant had been destroyed by the First Order.
Mm-hmm.
That was like, it was like, no. And, and they did remove any reference to because I guess there was a deleted sequence that has not been, I don't know if it's been provided in this new Blu-ray that's coming out next week or not.
Mm-hmm.
I won't know because I'm not buying it. I've decided to it's so close to Black Friday. They're going to have a deal on it. I don't want to spend that. I don't want to spend a full $30 on something I already technically own. And I'm also hoping iTunes will dump, because I was looking at the deleted scenes, and except for this one with Chewbacca and Ungor Plot.
Yeah.
Apparently, basically, that's the only deleted scene that I haven't seen, because they were all provided as iTunes extras.
Yeah.
Because you got an extra from iTunes, and they actually they've added new extras as time has gone on. So I'm kind of hoping that maybe after a week or so, they'll just kind of surreptitiously add the commentary and the extra deleted scene onto the iTunes thing. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
I don't think I was going to get $30 worth out of that commentary, but maybe I should have done it for the show. But maybe as the Christmas season goes on.
Yeah.
There's so there's going to be another here's an episode. There's not a lot of episode 8 stuff coming out, but most of it's costume.
Well, there is, but it's like plot.
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, there's some potential spoilers, which I don't
want to talk plot. But I guess we're in the time-honored tradition of every Star Wars movie, whether you're a spin-off or not, you're going to get a new stormtrooper. And what was the stormtrooper? We forgot to write that down.
I don't think it's said. I think it was just there's going to be a new kind of stormtrooper.
There was some kind of, oh gosh.
Oh really?
Yeah, it was like.
Let me try to look it up quick.
Assassin trooper.
Oh yeah.
First Order Executioner.
That's right. The Executioner troopers. Well, so the Executioner is or it's not a type of, they're not like a bunch of them, it's apparently just one. A stormtrooper being referred to as the Executioner, as well as other slight variations on set. So we could be getting both a new kind of stormtrooper and the Executioner, and it I don't know. Like they can easily take this overboard too far. Like I think they run the risk of this turning into people saying, "Oh, well, you're just doing this to sell more toys." Well, which they probably are.
Yeah, that's why they always had a new trooper. They added, they added two. They would, there were stormtroopers and pilot troopers. They'd always add two new stormtroopers. It was like, your pilots and your normal troopers, then your snow troopers and your AT-AT walker.
I mean, having the snow troopers and maybe the speeder bike scout troopers, though, or at least the stormtroopers, right? That made sense within the context of the story and like their locations and where they are. I mean, I don't think they specifically said, okay, well, let's put this on a snow planet so that we can create a new kind of stormtrooper and then sell more toys, right? But so I do think they run the risk, at least for the non-hardcore fans, the non-toy collectors, of if this thing turns into, oh, well, they're just making more Star Wars movies to sell more toys, that's when I think they run the risk of, the non-hardcore fan, the casual fan support drying off, and maybe ticket sales start to trickle back a little bit That's not even a turn of phrase. I don't know what trickle back.
trickle
but you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
I mean, they've said they're going to keep making Star Wars movies as long as people want to go see them, and that's fine. That's great. But they just need to make sure that they're not the reason. They don't like actively make decisions that lead people to stop going to see these movies. And if it turns into like, oh, they're just making these to sell more toys, I'll just see the movie when it comes out, and I'll just watch it on the plane, after it gets released to the airplanes, right? Then that's, I think, when that's something they might need to start being careful about.
Yeah, and this makes me think, actually kind of brings up a thought I've had, and it's kind of like, it's not really tied to anything specific, but it's like one of my dumb Star Wars theories or thoughts that I will share with the listeners is like, I was just thinking like, why it was a missed opportunity in the Force Awakens to kind of flip the script a little bit when it came to the First Order, because it's like, it always confused me. Like I don't think they ever got the idea that the First Order were actually, people knew that they existed, but they thought that they were relatively like a minor annoyance, or not even a military force. But it was like, and of course, whenever the whole Snoke theory, which I don't actually think Snoke is anybody, I think Snoke is Snoke. But when this is all resolved, and I assume he's the bankroll for this, I think it would have been kind of a nice doff of the cap to the original trilogy if they had almost made the First Order kind of like the invert of the Rebellion. The fact that like they always thought the used universe, like
right.
They would always imply that the rebels were using like leftover ships from a bygone era that they had to make do with because they were undermanned and underfunded. I almost think it would have been more interesting if they had originally kind of posited the First Order as being kind of like a group that lived on the detritus of the Empire and like left over, like maybe it was, and they had done this they had actually done this in a something similar in one of the very, very, very old Marvel comics, but they would have like things where it was like an X-wing with like a stormtrooper cockpit with on the wings or whatever. It was like that kind of idea that they actually would like people, like they'd have squadrons of kind of slightly pieced together TIE fighters and whatever, Star Destroyers. So, I mean, the Star Destroyer, which goes to show you how much I was kind of underwhelmed by the look of the First Order. Like this, I guess the Star Destroyer has a name, but I don't know the name of it. And it's like,
I don't remember.
It almost looks like a clone army transport from the thing stacked on something else. I mean, I kind of almost wish they had done that and made it kind of like now they're the underdogs, but not that they're the good guys, but just the idea that they're the ones at a technological disadvantage.
Yeah,
kind of makes people why everybody thinks they're a joke, and then when they blow up, when they blow up the planet, then they're like, oh, because there's like that subtle thing when Poe Dameron is brought on to the Star Destroyer, he looks in the hangar and he's almost shocked at what he sees about how organized they are, but I feel like that's a thing that you don't really quite pick up until like way later, and it's because he just does this weird expression, and you're like, well, why is he doing that? He's in
awe of like everything around him,
right? And but I mean, you can't go back and change it, so it doesn't really matter. But I would be interested, and maybe I'll have to go back and flip through that Art of the Force Awakens book to see what some of the concepts were looking like. But I feel like the fact that the First Order, they had TIE fighters and they were trying to come up with a new look for the TIE fighters. I think that was pretty early on, but I'd be interested to see, and I don't know that these are in there, but I would be interested to see even more of the concept art and maybe what the early concept art really, 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 really early, or, the stuff that didn't make it into the book. Because, and I say that because, so also on the Star Wars show a few weeks ago, they had Doug Chang talking about Rogue One and his work on Rogue One and his work on that Amy Hennig video game. And he was talking about the concept art for Rogue One and specifically the U-Wing.
and they had, I'm blank, I can't remember the exact number, but it was somewhere between like 500 and 700 concept drawings. Ooh. Because they were told like we want to come up with like a new iconic ship, right? And so they have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these things. And some of the ones he showed, I mean, they look very similar to those Clone Wars era Republic troop transports. You know, that I thought was a really interesting idea. That, okay, post Clone Wars, you know, whatever company was manufacturing those ships, they maybe didn't build as many of them because there wasn't as much demand. But, you know, the rebellion would still like maybe use some of that older style or you know, find whatever ships they could. Maybe it was, you know, the not the top of the line troop transport like they had in the Clone Wars, but it's whatever, you know, 10 years later. And so, yeah, I would be interested to seeing, like you said, if there was any of those similar kinds of ideas present for the Force Awakens of, you know, the drop ships for the First Order stormtroopers when they show up on
Jakku?
Jakku, yeah, in the beginning, sorry. I kept wanting to say Takodano, and I know that's wrong. Right, but on Jakku, right, in the very, very beginning, what kind of evolution did those go through? Was it always, okay, we know we kind of want to make these look like, you know, the World War II shore, you know, landing ships, or, you know, how much of that, like you're saying, was okay, well, maybe we make them look a little bit more used, a little more imperial rather than for sure. So I mean, that is to say, you know, we're learning a little bit about some of how these movies are made in the creative process, and we're getting to see some of this concept art, but there's so much more out there that we're not seeing. And, you know, maybe there's a reason for that. Either because maybe it'll be used in the future, or maybe it's because, you know, they didn't think it would be that interesting to show people 700 sketches of the same idea. But I mean, it's very possible that is one direction that they went in and then decided to change and come and say like, no, let's make this look like if Apple was running
right
the Galaxy.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, that's the thing. It's like, I guess they are trying to, if Snoke is kind of like, you know, this mysterious wealthy benefactor, then he would maybe have the resources that he wouldn't have to buy used. It's like, you know, because it's, I don't know. It's, I guess my final point on this is that I guess I never felt like they properly established that the Empire and the First Order are not the same thing. Even though it's like the Empire is gone, you know, stuff. But the fact that the Stormtroopers look so similar but scaled down, it's like you just immediately think Empire. And then you go and you think about it later, like, wait a second, it's not the Empire. You know, they have different goals, or well, they do, but they do and they don't. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, but I always found that confusing.
Yeah.
So, do we want to talk about this end credits?
Well, this is just to wrap up movie stuff. I don't know how much you might have to say about this, but one thing I thought was interesting is that, so Doctor Strange is coming out this weekend. Several weeks ago, maybe even longer than that, Disney and Marvel released the end credits music for this. It showed up on YouTube and you know, other places, like, oh, here's what the end credits music sound like for Doctor Strange. And because it's owned by Disney, I wondered if they would ever do something like that for any of the Star Wars movies. You know, that John Williams, as long as John Williams is working on them, probably not those. At the same time, you know, the end credits music that John Williams writes, it's sort of a compendium of his, you know, whatever he thinks the big character themes are from that movie. And so, you know, you might get to hear some themes without knowing what they tie to, like what characters are tied to. And so that might raise interest, like, oh, I wonder what this music is for. But, you know, even if they just did them for these anthology movies, you know, whatever Giacchino is writing for Rogue One or whatever shows up in the Young Han Solo movie, you know, whether that will be part of the kind of marketing push and building the buzz for these movies. Like, oh, listen to what the score sounds like for this movie. You know, this is the end credits movie. So I was kind of thinking about whether they would start doing that, and how. I mean, do you think they would ever do that? And if so, how would you feel about hearing some of the score, weeks prior to seeing the movie?
Well, I mean, if you remember for the prequels, that because it was right in the late, early 21st century, there was the whole idea of, and this is somebody else's observation, and I forget who it was. It might have been Rebel Force Radio, or Dave Collins on Oxygen, Star Wars Oxygen, but the idea that was the prime time for like basically the last gasp for the music video, and they Duel of the Fates, and then for Across the Stars in Attack of the Clones, there was this idea like they premiered this Duel of the Fates thing with a video and stuff, and it was a promotion. It was actually a very big thing, and then they really promoted the idea of Across the Stars as being like it's the first Star Wars love theme for romance, and they were really trying to play up the romance, and they did a video, but I think by the time Revenge of the Sith came, they didn't even do it. They released like a promotional DVD with Ian McDiarmid talking about his favorite, like something about the themes. I mean, they'd abandoned it. So, I mean, it's kind of funny because like people consume music in such a different way now that it's almost like it's a foregone conclusion that people want an excerpt. It's like, like, oh, my album doesn't come out till the 23rd, but then you go to iTunes and it's like three of the best tracks are already available for people. So they're like, well, technically, the parts of the albums that most people are going to listen to anyway are already out. So your album's really out. It's like your first three singles, or if you pre-order or whatever. I mean, I would be interested. I'm at the point now where it's like, it's like, there's no way doing this show that I'm going to be able to avoid spoilers. I can it's just how spoiled I want to be. So I'm all right with hearing a little bit of it. I mean, I think part of maybe Marvel's point with the Giacchino thing is and the Doctor Strange thing, I mean, is that it's a very different track. It's I kind of, in my notes, I listened to it before the show, and I basically put Alan Parsons and Queen, the Flash Gordon soundtrack. It's kind of like in that realm of a rock with there's some sitar, so there's a slightly Eastern feel to it. Right. But it's
the Doctor Strange movie, so it's a little more psychedelic.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing where it ties into its 70s roots. Obviously, I don't think that has any bearing on what Giacchino's going to do with Star Wars. I almost wonder if they wouldn't do something like with Rogue One, just out of fear that if they've decided to do a slightly different type of score, which is totally within their purview to do, it might scare people and cause some backlash. Like if they do something like maybe it. Gosh, personally, I hope it's not going to be anything with conventional rock instrumentation. I don't, there has been electric guitar on a John Williams score, even in as far as in Attack of the Clones, but very sparingly, to the point where you're almost like you're not quite sure what you heard. So, I mean, not that he's going to do that, but I mean, if he has decided, say, I'm going to do something, I don't want to try to compete with John Williams, so I'm going to do something different. Like, maybe the fact that if they put that out 2 weeks thing might actually be more damaging than helpful about getting people excited.
Possibly. Because and I do think, I mean, Giacchino, he does throw, unique instrumentation. The Ratatouille score had, what's it called? Accordion in it, because, they reflect the Paris settings, but like we said, this because it's Doctor Strange and they're talking about bending space and time, so it's a little more psychedelic. But for this Rogue One thing, since it's like a war movie, I don't know. I mean, the only thing I can think of is like a bunch of drums, maybe. But then, what does that do to separate itself from all of these other soundtracks out there that just have a lot of thundering drums to symbolize battle? I would imagine that he's going to find some way to make it unique. But I just the setting of the movie and the tradition of Star Wars scores is such that like I have a hard time figuring out how he's going to do that without like completely going in a different direction, which then adds a lot of uncertainty to it.
Yeah, it's listening to like season 2 and 1 of Lost, which is the Giacchino scores that I actually own. Mm-hmm. It's like, and maybe he was kind of trying to emulate, because it was a tropical island on Lost, mm-hmm. that he used a lot of the, what is it, not the xylophone, but the wooden boxes that you hit with mallets and stuff like that, kind of in subtle ways. I mean, I think you could mm-hmm. do that stuff. I mean, what's the name of the planet where supposedly the final battle takes place? It has palm trees. It's
right.
So yeah. It's not gonna be like, oh my God. It's like that thing where it's like in our heads, they see palm trees and then like hearing like wooden drums and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Wooden percussion.
Right. But how do you do that without making it cliche and a stereotype?
Well, I think it's going to, I mean, it's almost like, it's like the subtlety. He's going to have it be so subtle. It's going to be like low mixed, like John Williams would have synth tones to underpin, tension, say, like, especially in Jedi in Jabba's palace. There's a lot of low synth bass notes kind of thrown in there on a very, mm-hmm. he doesn't do a full like comb filter sweep like a wow. It's just like it's like boom boom boom. It's like just to underpin it. I think I'm really hoping for a subtle score. I really, it's all right if he takes a chance or two, but I definitely wouldn't want anything like this, Doctor Strange level of instrumentation, but it might work. I don't know. Unfortunately, it's like, I don't think I'm going to go see Doctor Strange in the theater. It just doesn't seem like my kind of movie, but
I'm debating about it.
I felt that way about Ant-Man, and I didn't go see it. And then I went and saw it, and I was quite pleased. I actually found Ant-Man to be refreshing. Like it was, I actually found it had a lot more energy than, say, even Captain America in the last Avengers movie. So, maybe if I hear good things, I might actually go out and see it.
Yeah, I'm interested in seeing it. The issue for me is finding, 3 hours out of my day.
Is it 3 hours long?
It. No, it's like 2 something.
You mean like credits, getting seated, getting there.
Getting to the theater, getting home from the theater. It's essentially a 3-hour undertaking. Which that also reminds me. Did you see and staying with Rogue One? There were a couple of weeks ago. There was this thing online, like some people were saying that Rogue One, they were worried that it wasn't long enough.
No, what's the running time on
basically so the running time is it's a couple minutes shorter than The Force Awakens. Sorry, I'm trying to look this up while
that is a little short.
I mean, is it though? Like, it's 1:33, I think, right?
Well, I thought 2 hours and 13 minutes. I thought the Force Awakens was like 2:03 or something like that.
Yeah.
2:13 is pretty good. I mean, that's not bad. That's long.
Star Wars Rogue One runtime announced. Is it too short? This is movieweb.com. So it's 133 minutes. If this is accurate, it's 5 minutes shorter than The Force Awakens. It's also the exact same runtime as The Phantom Menace. And there's no, I guess, source here, but it says some fans are claiming that this is too short for what needs to be accomplished in this movie, while others are calling the runtime perfect in an age of bloated blockbusters. All in all, the runtime falls in line with the 2-hour mandate set by the earlier Star Wars movies, right? So I guess, and this doesn't like link to anything specific. I guess there are some other, maybe some other sites below it that talk about the same thing, but this idea that like, well, there are all these characters that you have to manage. Is this movie going to be long enough to do what it needs to do? And it's just like, how do we get to the point where a 133-minute movie is considered too short now? Like, I don't get it.
That's really, it's a really strange kind of I mean, obviously this kind of complaint, it's like, I mean, it's funny that we should talk about this because this, it's a byproduct of this kind of secondary culture that exists of podcasts and people constantly analyzing. So that means us.
The need for content.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems like a really odd complaint because one, we haven't seen anything yet. And also Star Wars is, Star Wars is definitely maybe the only reason I would say, okay, well, I understand it because if they have real concerns, but how could they? Because they're not seeing it, is that Star Wars is not a thing that it's not a malleable, that's not even true. But I mean, it's not like my point is they don't go back and release extended editions. They've done special editions, of course.
Right.
But they don't ever go, get it on video and get the extended, the Suicide Squad, they complained about not enough Joker, if they felt ripped off, and then all of a sudden magically the Suicide Squad digital copy that comes out next week is going to have extended Joker sequences. I mean, they're literally just trying to please people, but that's Warner Brothers and DC's. They've got a whole bunch of problems they're trying to fix with their cinematic universe. I just people have this thing where it's like they want more and more of it's almost gluttonous. Whereas I think of, Empire, and it's like, I think of Empire as like a 3-hour movie, and it's only 2 hours and 7 minutes with the credits. And it's like, it's just how you tell the story. It's really, it's about the balance,
the pacing, it's the editing. Yeah.
I don't think people should worry. I think if you made a 3-hour Star Wars movie, a lot of the cracks, a lot of the weaknesses of the cinematic universe would start to show. It's like, it's not, then it's like, 3 hours, we've got to fill 3 hours. Let's talk about our feelings. It's like, well, Star Wars isn't really like, they don't spend a lot of time on feelings. It's usually a conversation and they move on. It's like emotional things aren't like revisited. It's like, remember like earlier in the movie when we talked about how much we missed our son? Can we talk about that again? I mean, if it was a 3-hour Force Awakens, I mean, I understand people are Star Wars fan. They want as much as possible, but also think about how it can work. Like, I would say that every time I've never gone back to and I don't watch it a lot, but I enjoyed Peter Jackson's original Lord of the Rings trilogy greatly. And I actually enjoyed the extended versions to the point where I've never revisited the theatrical ones once they've come out on home video. But that being said, it's like The Hobbit was an exercise in the fact that they wanted to have as people in the theaters for as long as possible. They, they created characters that didn't exist in the books or moved characters from, ancillary material just to pad out 2 movies. And then they found out that they couldn't do it. So they had to actually literally create a 3rd movie so they would be able to meet their release date for what was initially going to be the second and final film, which caused major problems. And my point is that too much of a good thing, you can have a situation like The Hobbit, which, no matter how many times I start that trilogy, it's like I get bored very quick. It's like, way too long. And I don't even feel like the theatrical versions of those movies are much better. It's just, a friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, who I don't think listens to the show, he's very convinced that basically all movies should be about 90 minutes long.
Right.
And he reviews movies. I think he reviews as a job because he just how much time do I have to give to these movies? Now I would say that between 90 and 100 minutes and 90 minutes is perfect for a comedy. And for an action movie, like a horror movie, I think is to me, the sweet spot is about 145, because if it's a really good horror movie, you're do you really want to be disturbed for over 2 hours?
Right.
But, for an action, fantasy, sci-fi movie, 2 hours and some change, that's about your sweet spot, because the Captain America, I think, was 2.5, and I found
and those movies too, all those Marvel movies that are 2.5 plus hours. I mean, there's a lot of filler in there. You can say there's some great action sequences and everything, but there's a lot of two characters talking to each other.
Yeah, I would argue. Especially
there's a lot of downtime in those movies, and so you're just kind of you forget about some of those things after you leave the theater, and you remember the stuff you're supposed to remember, but it's not like those are so lean that you couldn't cut anything from them.
Yeah, and like another example would be, and I don't know the runtime of it, but a couple weeks ago, I saw the most recent Star Trek, and I've said before, I'm a big Star Trek fan, just not a huge fan of these movies, and unfortunately this one didn't really grab me. I think if it had been about an hour and 40 minutes, I think I would have enjoyed it a lot better, because it did. It got ponderous, it got boring, it got muddled. And not to say that a short Star Wars movie, it's like 140. I've watched a lot of, for a long time I was obsessed with these prequel recuts that they would do. I think I've watched at least 50% of them, and it's like a lot of things. I removed all of Jar Jar Binks. I added the deleted sequence back or whatever. And I don't feel like, except for like maybe one or two scenarios, most of the cuts were lesser. They would cut the Phantom Menace down to 90 minutes. I still don't think. I think it didn't. It's still. I still prefer the theatrical cut, because it's like a lot of these people are people with home editing.
The theatrical cut, or like whatever made it onto the
whatever finally made it on. Yeah, no, I would say the theatrical cut, because yes, when it was released on video, they added another dumb sequence with a shuttle, and they added another lap to the pod race, and it's like, I stick with the theatrical cuts as being, they did, and also, and it's the last thing example I'll give is when, back, I guess we're getting on to 15 years now, when, Attack of the Clones came out on IMAX, because of at the time, the restrictions of the format, because they were still using physical film. They cut out, which, they went from being one of the longest theatrical presentations of a Star Wars movie to being one of the shortest, because they cut out huge sequences. And people still were like, even though that people said it was over bloated at first, they said whatever cut they did was kind of, it felt like the guts had been taken out of it. So it's like, there's a sweet spot at the 2 hour, 10-minute area of a Star Wars movie that I think with credits and opening, this isn't going to have an opening sequence in it, but it won't have us crawl. Supposedly, I just think for this kind of story, that's about where you want to stick it. So I don't agree that it looks too short.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Less is more. Less is more.
Yeah. So I think that's a good place to wrap up our movie talk.
Yeah.
There are two big comics things that I think we should cover this week. The first is that the Darth Vader comic came to its end, and then we also got confirmation that there will be we knew that there was going to be this new ongoing comic series, and we got confirmation that it will be a Dr. Aphra series, who is an original character who originated in the Darth Vader comic. But so let's start with, this was 25 issue series, Darth Vader. It whereas at least initially when it first came out, it was billed as, okay, well, the Star Wars series is going to show you, what Darth Vader does on Monday, and then the Darth Vader comic shows you what he does, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So it was always designed to kind of dovetail or weave in and out of the Star Wars comic storylines, but just kind of all give Darth Vader his own space to kind of do other things and to fill in the gaps, or to bridge A New Hope with The Empire Strikes Back, right? Where A New Hope, he has no idea that Luke Skywalker exists, basically, and then Empire Strikes Back, he does. Like they refer explicitly to the son of Anakin Skywalker and all that. So how do you get from point A to point B? And this Darth Vader comic was supposed to do that. So this final issue, just to set the scene, the kind of main antagonist, I guess, in this series was someone named Silo, who is a cybernetically enhanced scientist or something. He, with the Emperor's blessing, created this group of people, minions, who use lightsabers, some of them did, or a lot of them did. They had cybernetic implants, but they couldn't use the Force, but they were sort of designed as maybe a potential replacement for Darth Vader. And so everything is culminating. Darth Vader, built up a droid army to fight bad, to kind of fight for his place in the Emperor's graces. He encountered Aphra, who is this droid archaeologist who had BT something and 000, who are basically evil droids. And so in this final issue, Vader, it's all come to a head. Vader is with the Emperor on the Star Destroyer, but the Star Destroyer has been sabotaged by Silo's people. Silo is there with his space whales that he has converted into starships, I guess. And so Vader's there in his personal TIE fighter. He's shooting down these space whales. He makes his way inside the command ship. He's surrounded by all of so Silo has cloned himself, and so he's surrounded by Silos. He kills them all, and then he uses the Force to control the command whale, because I don't know what else to call it. The command whale. He uses the Force to take that command whale and drive it into a star. He escapes before that, of course. He then returns to the Executor, the Star Destroyer, where it turns out Aphra has been talking to the Emperor, telling him, basically coming clean on what had been happening. Palpatine is, of course, very proud of Vader. He's finally taken his rightful place by my side. And Vader then is like, yeah, great. I still have to kill you because you know too much about me. So he shoots Aphra out of the airlock. At which point Palpatine demotes Tag or Taggy. I don't know how you pronounce that.
I always pronounce it
who
Taggy.
had been in charge. Right. So he demotes Taggy, puts Vader in command of the Executor. Vader then, of course, kills Taggy. And that is how Admiral Ozzel becomes the ranking Imperial official as seen in The Empire Strikes Back. But wait. So Aphra was shot out of the airlock. She's actually rescued by the two evil droids and Black Chrysanthemum, who's basically the evil Chewbacca, using some of the stuff they used from a previous robbery in the series, because Aphra knew that the only way to really be free of Vader and to not be looking over her shoulder forever is if he thought she was dead. And so she is going on to her own adventures now, and that is how the story wraps up. But then there's this interesting little kind of coda or this mini comic after that about Vader's encounter with Tusken Raiders from the very beginning of this issue, of this comic rather, and then how the Tuskens kind of reacted to Vader slaughtering all of them and either worshiping him or vowing vengeance. I'm not totally clear on that. How did you feel about this issue, Robert?
Well, I mean, I thought it was as an issue all stuff, I guess it's like there was a lot to tie up at the end. And I felt like it did it all right, but then some of it, like, it just seemed like the pacing was a little off.
Yeah. They had a lot they had to wrap up. And so I think particularly that battle between Vader and Silo and everything, like, it was a little anticlimactic because it just like, yeah, he took care of them. Like,
right. Vader's
very powerful. These people aren't. So fight's over. Great. But if that's the main antagonist and you've been building it up ostensibly for 24 issues, like, it was over pretty quick.
Yeah, it was kind of underwhelming, especially with like the kind of excitement of him being able to best Vader and shut his armor down just like an issue or two previous, and then when Vader is able to turn it back on, that he's actually just kills the clone, and you're just like, oh well, that might have been a better way to actually finish off the real Silo. I mean, it wasn't bad. I mean, the thing is, like, I had these ups and downs with the Darth Vader comic, and I would actually say that, my overall feelings are positive about it. I mean, I subtitle this, the entire 25 issue run is how Darth got his groove back, basically, because it's like he starts out being completely emasculated by losing, the Death Star, and he's kind of has to, he has to go back into the gutter. It's like it's like that the middle third of a Rocky movie where he's out there punching sides of beef and getting his hunger back for what he wants to do. And I just wish, I mean, the thing about Aphra, it's like, I understand. It's like, I actually got from being like annoyed with Aphra to being like, I kind of like her as a character. But it's like, I almost like, really, she's getting a spinoff. I mean, I'll read it, but I was kind of like, I'm kind of surprised that was going to the end. And I almost think it would have been better to have told the story that he like killed her, and he killed her for sure. Because it's like, because when I first was reading it, before I actually get the part at the end, I was like, what a jerk. Because I was like thinking like, oh no, he's not going to kill her. It's like, that's going to be the whole point. And I think maybe they'd already let the cat out of the bag that there was going to be an Aphra series. And I was like, well, he's not going to kill her. And no, he did. He did it in the most cruel, uncalculated way, because he just walked her out the airlock. Says, get in there. I'm going to open this. I'm going to kill you. And then he's like, well, I thought you said you'd kill me with the lightsaber. And he's like, I lied. And he kills her. And you're like, oh man, he's literally got his groove back. He is a complete a-hole. He is the Vader that scares me. The Vader that when, Cloud City, which we assume will be a couple months later, a year later, when that door opens and he's at that dinner table, your heart jumps. Yeah. He's not Anakin Skywalker. He's the Darth Vader that we all love to hate. And somehow I felt like, even though he supposedly doesn't know about it, the fact that she escaped from him kind of dulled that a little bit. And I thought, well, it's like you could do that. You could do like young Aphra, or I think, are they going to do a 5-issue run of Aphra before she even met Vader? That's fine. I mean, I'll read that. But it's like, I kind of wish he had killed her and she was dead, because I think it would have would have kind of raised the stakes. And even though it's how do you raise the stakes, 30 plus years after we know how this is going to go. But just the idea that like what's going on in his head. And then it also raises the question that if he is the Dark Lord of the Sith and he can sense people, it's like, is he entirely sure that, are we entirely sure he knows for a fact that she's dead? Or he's just like, well, if she can get out of this, then she can go with my compliments. I'm not going to say anything. Because it's so funny when it comes back to the meeting and like Palpatine's like, oh, our friend won't be joining us. What a shame. It's just like, yeah, right. You knew he was going to do that, because that was so Vader. What would have, if she had been there, what would have Palpatine have said? It's like, oh, that was the final test. You failed. I'm giving it back to Taggy. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I do wonder what was her plan. Like, she basically had to have known that he was going to shoot her out of the airlock. Because what would her plan have been if he just cut her down with a lightsaber, or use the Force to crush her windpipe?
Right, and I think they kind of refer.
You're right. There's no way out of those. So yeah, I mean, I do wonder. I also wondered if he basically played along with her plan. Not that they communicated about it, but if he kind of sensed or knew or intuited that, okay, you know what? She doesn't want to have anything to do with me. She doesn't want to be looking over her shoulder. So either I have to kill her, or I recognize the fact that I wouldn't have gotten to this point without her. And so I kill her, but in such a way that she has a chance of surviving. Right? That I kill her in such a way that she could maybe put a plan together, if she had a plan together. Right. So yeah, I mean, I do wonder, and the writer of this hasn't indicated. I don't think he's addressed this, but I given the sequence of events, I was left wondering, like, okay, was Vader kind of hip to what was happening, and did he do it that way on purpose? And does he really know that she's probably not really dead? But as far as he's concerned, as far as the Emperor is concerned, like, yeah, she's gone. She's never going to bother them again, because if they do cross paths, like, that's really going to be the end of it for her.
Right.
Yeah. So I was left wondering the same thing.
I mean, I guess that's a good thing because I mean, yeah, you have a story where it's like it can be interpreted different ways, and that's something that, at least in my experience, doesn't come up very often in comics. So I guess I have my opinion about how I wish it would have gone, but then it's like I guess I'm gonna have to live with this. It's like almost like well, okay, I guess this story kind of gets its cake and gets to eat it too, and.
Yeah, but I do agree with you though. Like for the character of Vader, I mean, I guess for the relationship between Vader and Aphra, like doing it this way is satisfactory enough. But if he had actually killed her, I think you're right. That would have kind of raised the stakes, or let it sink in that like, oh no, Vader, like he is completely all the way Vader now. Like there's no Anakin Skywalker,
and that's
and the fact that they. I mean, so maybe they did it for that reason too, right? That they did it this way so that by the time he gets to Return of the Jedi, right, that Anakin Skywalker part of him isn't completely dead, right? That there is still that tiny glimmer in there, and if he had just outright killed Aphra, then that turn in Jedi doesn't connect as much.
Right, yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's like I think I've talked about this, about like the portrayal of Vader and the idea that he was like hadn't quite come into his own until Empire, really, even though he'd failed. But it's like that's also when the conflict starts. That's when the conflicted we know that we already get the feeling by the time, in retrospect of, say, the hologram sequence between the Emperor, that Vader's being deceitful already. He's being, he's like, we have a new enemy, Luke Skywalker. And he's like, well, yeah, but at first he acts like somehow it's like, are you surprised I said Luke Skywalker? And he doesn't react. And then he goes, but then he's like this whole thing where it's all, I think in some ways, like Palpatine is laying it out on the table saying like, we have a new enemy, this guy you've been hiding from me, but we already know he likes it when he's Palpatine kind of likes it when Vader's sleazy,
tested.
Yeah, he's kind of like being duplicitous and Sith rule
because that
too.
Deepens his connection to the dark side or whatever.
And then in some ways, like Vader's like, oh, he already knows. He's just a boy. We don't. It's like Obi-Wan can't help him. He's laying it out on the table. But to me, that's when the conflict really starts. Right. That's the thing, because it's like, people have always said, like, if you look at Jedi, it's like Vader is way less brutal to people. He doesn't just come down that plank in the Death Star and start strangling people for minor things or watch, putting people in dangerous situations, like go out into this asteroid field and go get those people. I don't care if it smashes the ship, that kind of thing. It's like he's not that he has a conscience. It's that his concerns are it's just not base violence. There was some deleted sequence, I guess, where he tries to strangle Jared, but I don't consider deleted scenes canon, but it was like he was already softening. And I guess that's kind of like if deep down he knows, like, well, if she can get out of this, then Godspeed. That maybe that's the beginning of the softening, because doesn't he do a line where does he do the "I have a son" line in this, or am I thinking of something? I might be thinking of.
You mean in the comic?
Yeah, maybe he does that in a.
I mean, early on. And he finds out that the pilot's name was Skywalker, right? Because the very early issues are about him trying to find out who was the pilot who brought down the Death Star, and then either Boba Fett or someone else tells him it was Skywalker, and then he I guess assumes it was a boy, right? So I can't remember if he says I have a son. I don't know.
I forget. I might be thinking of a Star Wars Infinities or something that I read years ago. But I mean, it's just the idea. Yeah, it kind of puts I guess you can interpret it two ways. You can interpret it's just a storytelling thing where he was able to, he thinks she's dead and she got away. Therefore, it sets this fun kind of way to start a clean slate for Aphra for her new it's in some ways it's an FU to Palpatine, where you did what I wanted all along. I wanted you to be a dick. And he's like, I'm not a complete dick. I'll give someone at least a fighting chance to get out of a situation. So, I guess I don't really need an answer. I guess what I'm saying is if I was writing the story, Aphra would have died. But then again, we would have been denied this Aphra miniseries. Or is it a regular series, or do we even know?
It's an ongoing series. Okay. Now, I think Vader might have been billed as an ongoing series when it first was created as well. So, we might get 20-something issues of Aphra, and then they decide to close it down. One thing I do want to talk about before moving on to the Aphra series, though, is to go back to what you said about kind of overall impressions of the Darth Vader title. I think I'm with you in that. On the whole, when I think about it, it's like, yeah, it was kind of a neat story, or like overall, it was a satisfying story, but there were, the Silo stuff I never got into that much. There were specific things here and there, and I'm like, I don't know how I feel about this. But overall, I have a positive attitude towards the Darth Vader comic. But the Star Wars website, StarWars.com, did an interview with the writer Kieran Gillen around the time that the final issue came out, and he kept referring essentially to the Darth Vader series as really writing something like a historical novel, which I thought was sort of an interesting way to think about it, and one that, maybe this is not true. Maybe it's just based on a few anecdotes, but I feel like, at least among guys who write, science fiction, fantasy stuff, they also read a lot of historical novels to get, what are some ideas I could use, or what are some battle tactics I could emulate, right? They read a lot of military history or that kind of thing, and so to have this set up as sort of a historical novel, or to have the writer say he viewed it as a historical novel, does that do anything for the way you view this comic? Does that change anything about your attitudes towards it? Does it make you like it better, or do you not care?
Well, I would say that I'm not a huge reader of historical fiction. It's like I would actually rather have. I'm kind of boring that way. I would rather hear like not a dry resuscitation of there's so, like, I was thinking about, like, the best example would be, and I don't know if you're a fan of Dan Carlin's Hardcore History.
I definitely know it is very popular.
It's like in the top 10 podcast. He's not a historian by trade. I think he's a broadcaster by trade, but he's got the best way of and he kind of tells it almost like a campfire story. And they're long podcasts. Some of them, like the most recent one, is 4 hours long, and it was a lot of it was about Alexander and King Philip II, his father and his mother, and the conquests of thing. And I find it much more fascinating to have them talk about it and maybe do a little interpretation, a little bit of comparison, contrast of like, oh, it's a lot like this, and it's a lot then like say. So I was listening to this, and then I thought, I bought like I said, we were on vacation and we're staying in this place, and they had a DVD player. So I grabbed a bunch of movies at half price books that I was like, something that like would take a whole day if we get bored. And I picked the final cut of Oliver Stone's Alexander, which, obviously it's historical fiction in movie form, but it's like hearing the here and now and the wherefores and the conversations, it's like, to me, it's not as compelling as just hearing what happened and maybe and how that reflects back into how it affected us as people, and like, oh, this is the first time this ever happened and it's been done ever since. So I guess I never thought about it in those terms of like Vader at this being like, oh, this is like a historical fiction, because I'm not a huge fan of the genre. So I don't think that doesn't make me like it more. It's more of like, all in all, I think it was an interesting story. The Vader Down was that the Shotun War, or is that a different?
The Shu Run War was it started with the Darth Vader Annual, and then it continued. No, Darth Vader Down was
a rebel fighting at the
pre-Shuto Run War, I think.
Yeah, see the Shuto Run thing, that was, to me, that was the most that would seem like like what he's saying, historical novel, and that was my least favorite part of the run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean it's sort of, I mean, it does kind of feel coherent overall, but at the same time, they did try to do a lot of different things in this title, right? You had the Shuto Run War, which, was sort of like you said, kind of like a military history or a historical novel of, this battle on a particular planet, and you had factories and this weird, not quite the steampunk that the Obi-Wan and Anakin was, but you did have this kind of old society, based on decorum and all of this kind of stuff with these old ruling families, and then you have the Star Wars Empire, iconography and all that, and then you had the silo, the like cybernetic, minions, and the lady void gazer who saw through all of these little remote shaped things, and you had the Mon Cal who had cybernetic legs, right? So you had those kinds of ideas, which don't really fit with the kind of Shuto Run War line, but those are kind of a different side of science fiction. And then you had the Vader Down stuff, that's like a classic Star Wars type story where Vader is alone on this planet full of rebels, and maybe it's not classic in the sense that we've seen it before, but it just felt very much like a traditional Star Wars story. And then at the same time, you had that Inspector Thanoth, I think his name was, like on the heels of Aphra and Vader, and trying to uncover who was behind this robbery, and who was stealing money and equipment to fund this droid army. So you had 4 or 5 different kind of styles of story going through this thing. And yeah, like you said, some of them worked better for me than others. And so to look at them as this kind of coherent historical novel, it's like, well, I don't know. It felt like they were trying to do several different things within that framework. So I don't know. I mean, when I first read that, I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And it did make me think about the thing overall a little bit differently. But when you break down all of the different kind of smaller arcs within it, it's like, yeah, this was sort of, you got a lot of different styles of a science fiction, Star Wars story within this one overarching story of how Darth Vader came to A, find out who blew up the Death Star and that he had a son, and then B, kind of reassume power within the Imperial infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing. The experimentation in a lot of ways, like maybe when I was reviewing this week to week, I was pretty critical of it. But then in retrospect, it's like, you almost have to salute him, because as far as like even compare, which we probably won't have time to get to Star Wars 24 this week, but it's like the experimentation is actually much more appreciated, and it felt okay, even more so. I guess a lot of the stories felt more compelling sometimes than even what the main Star Wars title itself was doing. Even though maybe sometimes the end result wasn't my favorite. I mean, that, and I guess what I'm trying to get around saying, that if people are out there and they're not regular comic readers, but they might have had their interest piqued by this, by maybe reading some Star Wars comics, I would say that, you could probably just start by reading the Vader Down miniseries, but then again, you might want to go back and, like, if you were going to read the run of something, I think that out of all of these, the Darth Vader would give you kind of like the best overall bang for your buck, as far as like, okay, they're maybe not everything they do here is like my favorite way of telling a story, but they are being experimental in some of the storytelling. And, it kind of gives you more of an overall comic book experience, because, that's Marvel Comics for you. I mean, I'm always been more of a Marvel guy, even though I don't read anything other than Star Wars comics these days. Just that kind of idea of a long kind of like 4 or 5 issue run, but with an overall arc. And it's actually, this is one of the best examples of being able to kind of see that in practice. They're basically 5 stories in this run that over 5 issues. I guess 26 issues, because I guess doesn't the annual count as the 26th?
Well, yeah, there were a few of the Star Wars title that were part of the Vader Down as well, so maybe 30-ish, close to 30 issues of that encompass this story.
Yeah, and then it's there's crossovers. Yeah, so I'm gonna think if you maybe in 6 months when they're all up on Marvel Unlimited, you use your free month trial and you go power through and read them, because I think it'd be worth your worth the trouble. And obviously the trades will be coming out pretty soon too.
Yeah. So the Aphra comic, you've talked about it a little bit. You're not really super into it. It sounds like, or you're not sure why it had to be Aphra. I guess is that.
Well, I mean, when you have a litany of well-known characters in a universe, why would you pick to do a run on something that has only ever appeared in somebody else's comic? But
yeah, I guess I would say I see the logic behind it for a couple of reasons. One, I mean, she, at least among the people who are reading the Darth Vader comic, right, she instantly became very popular, right? So she's kind of a hit, and I don't know if breakout character is really what to call it, because I don't know how many even of the hardcore Star Wars fans know who she is if they're not reading the comics, right? But she's sort of established herself. She has a very clear identity. She's this archaeologist. She's sort of a lady Indiana Jones in the Star Wars universe in some ways, right? That's
right.
I mean, that's reductive, but it's what it is. You pair her with, now she has this group of colleagues, the evil droids and the evil Wookiee. I believe that this comic's going to pick up where Darth Vader 25 left off, and so it's going to be her life post Vader. I guess they could throw some flashbacks in, it's sort of like what they did with the Kanan comic, I guess. But so she still kind of has to keep her head down. She can't make too much noise to make it obvious that Vader didn't actually kill her, because that's bad for her, and that's bad for Vader, which means it's doubly bad for her. But the Marvel kind of release on this said, she's trying to go back to her old life of being this archaeologist. So we'll get to see her, interacting with weird old Star Wars droid technology, on her own adventures. And while she has to avoid Vader, at the same time, she's also, with the Rebel prison, or Rebel Jail, that's what it was called, that storyline, she was present for that. So she's interacted with Leia, at least, and Sana, because we're not sure what Sana's ultimate fate is going to be, right? So you have potential for her to kind of interact or move through both the Empire and the Rebel side of this conflict, but also you have room to have this character to tell a bunch of Star Wars, to make a bunch of Star Wars content without necessarily worrying about trying to fit it into where the canon is and making sure that you're not contradicting something that's in the works, or you can still make a Star Wars comic without having to thread the needle, right? You can,
right.
It's kind of wide open, and you can go in a lot of different directions. And so I could see why that idea would be attractive to Lucasfilm and to Marvel when coming up with the next Star Wars title. So, I think I like that character a little more than you did, I think. I will say I liked her a lot earlier in the run, and then after a while she kind of got pushed off to the side because it seemed like they weren't really sure what to do with her after a while. Like she didn't really fit into the story they were telling about Vader. But I'm interested to see what they do with it. But I also, even if I didn't, I can kind of see several different reasons behind doing it, giving her this comic.
Yeah, I mean, even in the most simplistic, when they have all these great Star Wars movies out here right now that are led by female heroes or protagonists, I guess I'll say, not heroes. I mean, well, I guess they're heroes in the movies, but I'm saying I wouldn't call Aphra a hero. I guess it'd be nice because right now there isn't a current, they had the Princess Leia, but it was a short run thing. So it's like maybe they, this is an opportunity to have a female led hero protagonist in a Star Wars comic. And, when you parse it, that idea that, yeah, there's a way that you can look at, maybe some fun Star Wars stuff without having to make it like, oh, we got to tie it into this, or, oh, that contradicts what we're doing in, what happens in Empire, or, it is a good way for them to kind of play a little bit more with an established character. Well, at least I think was she in the whole 25 issue run?
No, I mean, because she disappeared for a while when she was in that Rebel jail storyline.
Right.
And I feel like there were other times. The Shuto Run War, she might have been in those issues, but she wasn't like super involved in them.
Right.
So I early on, she was really key to helping Vader kind of develop and start to build his own little enterprise. But then after a while, I think she kind of got pushed to the background a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I should say, like I said, it might give, like you were saying, it might give a little bit more room for experimentation and whatnot. It's like, yeah, I guess I just I still kind of, and this is probably an unpopular opinion, and we'll maybe when you do your Ahsoka review, we can talk about this again. But I was always kind of like this idea that like Anakin Skywalker had a squeaky kid as a sidekick. Like in the Clone Wars, it always never rung true with me, and it didn't become appealing until like Ahsoka had become more seasoned, and she was less of a squeaky kid, and more of a compatriot, even though she was technically a Padawan learner. But I felt like, the early kind of like the wisecracking and the, it's like if it was live action, it'd just be like gum chewing, smacking, like, what you doing, Vader? That kind of thing. It's like, yeah, that's probably why I didn't get on the Aphra bandwagon as much. But like I said, I'm totally open to seeing what they're going to do with this series. It's not, I'm not like, I will not read this. I'm interested in everything that they willing to offer. Now, whether I'll stick with it every week, that remains to be seen.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up.
Yeah.
Week. We've been talking for a while.
Yeah. If you want to reach out and talk to us, you can email us at hosts. That's host with an S at the end at talkingbirdcast.com. You could leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. I'd appreciate that. We also have a Twitter. It's at talkingbirdcast on Twitter. We actually have a Instagram that I've been very slow. I reactivated it.
Oh.
But I think it's just at talkingbirdcast. You can follow us on Instagram. We will obviously follow you back. We have a website, which is www.talkingbirdcast.com, where it's kind of like the hub of everything. That's John. He likes to, when he does his visual stuff about Rebels, he puts that on our old Tumblr page that I forgot even existed. It actually, and the funny thing is I have it set up whenever we post a new episode, it shows up there too. And I've been doing this for months and not even knowing it. So you can go to our, it's www.talkingbirdcast.com. No, I'm sorry. talkingbirdStarWars.tumblr.com.
Yeah.
Where those posts are directly. Or you can just go to the talkingbirdcast.com site, and then you can click on the link. We have like a link. If you've decided you do want to buy the 3D Blu-ray, unlike me, there's a ad box up there. There's an ad box for James Lucino's Catalyst that'll be coming out in about 2 weeks, which is the official Rogue One novel, tie-in novel that I think I think we're both going to read that.
Absolutely.
Well, you do that, or you can go www.talkingbirdcast.com/Amazon, and that it's a portal link for our Amazon affiliate page, and it's the easiest way to help the show. What happens is Amazon kicks a little bit back of your purchase back to us. It doesn't cost you anything extra. And I know you guys have been out there doing it because we've gotten finally gotten some money from Amazon. So I know you guys, I definitely appreciate it. Anything you do to help it offset the cost of hosting the show is very much appreciated. I think that's all I have to say. Do you have anything?
No, it's good to be back.
Yeah, it's good to be back.
Again sooner than last time.
Barring any major disasters, we will be back next week. And for Talking Birdcast, I have been Robert Zachary.
I'm still John Llewellyn.
Thanks for listening, and may the Force be with you. And put it on my tab.